Hi, in this video we take a first look at integers. We'll be looking at the definition of integers. We'll be looking at negative numbers, and we'll be looking at the absolute value. So the set of integers is the set that includes all the natural numbers, 0, and the negative of the natural numbers. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, and then negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, to infinity in both directions. So let's take a closer look at a negative number. You all know what a negative number is, but let's just go over this again. So to begin with, a negative number is one whose value is less than 0. So remember, negative numbers are always to the left of the 0 on the number line. Which of these is the smallest number? We look for the most negative, and so that's minus 78, and here it's minus 154. And then over here, what is the largest number? And it's 12. That's the most positive. That's the furthest to the right on the number line. And here is 0. So sometimes students get trapped by this. So be careful, right? This is a number that's farthest to the right on the number line. So sometimes a number and the negative of that number are called opposite numbers. So minus 8 and 8 are sometimes called opposite numbers. So just be aware that the sum of a number and its opposite will always give you 0. And now we look at the concept of the absolute value. So let's look at this little definition here. So the absolute value of x is going to be x if that number is what? Equal to 0 or greater than 0. So don't be intimidated. Don't be intimidated by this, right? The absolute value of some number is that number if that number is greater than or equal to 0, and the negative of that number when that number is less than 0. So let's take a look at this and see then. An example here would be if I have the absolute value of 5, well then that would be 5 because that number is greater than 0. How about the absolute value of 0? Well, that will be 0 because as long as this number in here is greater than or equal to 0, then the absolute value will be the number itself. And so then if it's negative, let's say 7, the absolute value will be 7 because it's going to be the negative of this. Remember, we want the opposite to this, right? And so the opposite to minus 7 is going to be 7. Alright. So we can use absolute values to express like distances, right? So when we say x minus a, the absolute value of x minus a, we're talking about the distance of x from a. So let's take an example here. Let's talk about x minus 8. So if we have x minus 8, let's say x minus 8 is equal to some 3. Well, what we're saying is that the distance of x from 8 is 3. So it's either 3 that way, which would put this at 11. So x minus 8 equal 3 gives us two answers for x. Then x can either be 11 or 5. Because for both of these numbers, x minus 8, the absolute value of x minus 8 will be 3. Notice in this case, 5 minus 8 gives me negative 3. But then the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. And so you can see these for this also, right? X plus 3 is the distance of some number from minus 3. So if I were to go x plus 3 absolute value is equal to, let's say, 5, well, remember, this is like saying x minus a negative 3, right? And so there's negative 3 there on the number line. And what we're saying here then is that the distance of x from negative 3 is 5. So that means it can be 5 over in this direction here. And so 5, and this would then be what? 5 plus a negative 3 would be 2. Notice the distance here is 5, right? And of course this would be negative 8. This is not drawn to scale, obviously, right? And so we have negative 8 here and 2 here. And so the distance in both cases would be 5. if I simply write the absolute value of x, well, then that's the distance from 0. That's like saying x minus 0, right? And so that's the distance of x from 0. And of course, if I were to put this in an equation and say, like, let's say 4, then if I draw my number line, and then, so x then is 4 units away from 0, so it could either be at 4 or at minus 4. So x in this case could either be 4 or minus 4. Right? So just be aware of that, right? Notice if I say the absolute value of x is equal to 5, let's say not 5, 15, then x could either be 5 or x could either be 15 or negative 15, right? Because the absolute value of 15 is 15, the absolute value of negative 15 is 15. So the absolute value of minus 6 is 6. And that gives us then what? The distance of minus 6 from 0. So the absolute value is kind of like giving you a distance from some point on the number line. So if I say the absolute value of minus 18, well, that's how far minus 18 is from 0. And of course, if this is 0 and this is minus 18, the distance then is just simply 18. So the absolute value of minus 18 is 18. So that's what this is saying here, right? The absolute value of x then is just the distance of that number from 0. So I hope this is clear, right? In many cases, all you need to know about the absolute value is that you can look at it simply and say, well, it's just like the number itself, right? So if I have the absolute value of, it's a number without a sign. So if I say the absolute value of negative 11, well, then it's just 11. However, it is important that you eventually begin to look at it in this context here. You know, like it's the distance. The absolute value is giving you a distance. So let's evaluate these then, right? And so the absolute value of minus 5 is just 5. This will just be 0. This will just be 13. So the absolute value of x minus 15 when x is 18. Well, what's that going to be? Well, that's simply going to be 18 minus 15. That's going to be the absolute value of 3, which is just simply 3. And how when it's 12? When x is 12, so that's 12 minus 15. The absolute value of 12 minus 15 is the absolute value of minus 3, which is again the just 3, right? And so you can look at all of these, right? The absolute value of x plus 7 when x is equal to 18. So that's the absolute value of 18 plus 7. Absolute value of 25. That's 25. And then the absolute value of x plus 7 when x is equal to minus 4. These are pretty trivial, and I hope that you're getting the sense of this, right? There's nothing all that mysterious about this. And so we have minus 4 plus 7. Of course, then that would be absolute value of 3, which is just simply 3. All right. And this last one here. This should be obviously very easy. 6 minus 2, we attack the parentheses first. 6 minus 2 gives us 4. And then that gives us then 3 4 is 12. 9 minus 12 is minus 3. And then notice the absolute value of minus 3 is 3. So do not say minus, and minus gives us plus, right? This is minus whatever this is, and this is 3. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3. And then 24 minus 3 is 21. So that concludes this little presentation here. I hope you got it. Thanks for your attention, and see you soon.